Stefanos Loukopoulos, very Greek. We're in the center of Athens, the birthplace of democracy, and we're going to talk about democracy. I'd like for you to share how democracy works here in Greece.
Democracy, as you said, was born in Greece. Unfortunately, however, I believe that democracy could be employed and implemented better. Why am I saying this? The Greek political system is known as a parliamentary representative democracy, which means that we've got a government, which is the executive body, which is led by the prime minister, who one may say is the most influential political authority in the country. And at the same time, we've got a parliament which is composed of 300 members from all over Greece, so each constituency is represented, and which has the role to legislate. I mentioned earlier on that democracy could be implemented slightly better. Why? Because the way our political system is structured and the way the electoral system is structured, the political party that gains a majority in the elections gets an extra bonus of 50 seats in parliament, which basically means that the parliament is fully controlled by the government.
By one party.
By one party.
Which, if I may interject, is very different than the way we do things in the United States. I mean, we have distinct bodies. We have two legislative bodies. We have a House of Representatives and a Senate. We also have the executive branch. And of course, we have an independent Supreme Court. Now, the legislative branches, though, the Senate, the House of Representatives, and the executive branch, could at any given time be controlled by different parties. Thus, we have somewhat of a checks and balance where if one party is trying to drive something through, the other party can stop it in the next legislative body. So given this disparity, if you will, how does democracy work here? If one party gets elected, you mentioned how they win these additional seats in parliament, controlled by the same prime minister, what's the purpose of the opposition? How do things get done here in a democratic way?
Exactly. Well, the opposition is mainly there to criticize the government, is mainly there to showcase and to the broader audience, the citizens, issues that might come up with the legislation proposed by government, but that's it really. That's it. In theory, the parliament also acts as a checking mechanism towards government, but obviously, as I said, with the current political system, current electoral system, this is not possible. A parliament should be there to legislate, not only ratify legislation, but also initiate legislation. And that's something that practically cannot happen.
But this isn't unique to Greece. I mean, there are many parliamentary democracies in the world where things get done, right?
The difference is that in most parliamentary democracies, especially in Europe, we don't have this bonus of the 50 extra seats for the winning party. And therefore, governments and parliaments are forced to reach decisions through consensus and through collaborations and through partnerships with various political parties. And this is what makes, I believe, a parliamentary democracy work, when there's consensus in the decision-making and in the legislation.
Yeah, which in the United States, a lot of times you'll see political compromise. You'll see the Republicans reaching out to the Democrats saying, I'll give you this if you give me that. And
exactly.
In good political climates, things happen. Unfortunately, we don't have a very good political climate in the United States these days. But so it's important to have organizations like Vouliwatch. Vouliwatch is the organization that you represent, that you are the executive director of. I want you to tell me about Vouliwatch and why an organization like Vouliwatch is critical in a democracy such as Greece.
Well, I would start with the second part of your question. Why is it critical? Because of what I just explained earlier on. There's no one really to check Parliament. Vouliwatch is a non-for-profit organization. We're independent. That means that we're not relying on funding from political parties or big business in Greece. And our main aim is to promote democracy, transparency, and political accountability. The way we do this is by employing civic technology, digital technology, which allows citizens to exert control over their elected representatives. We've created this web platform whereby citizens can monitor what's being voted in Parliament. They can monitor the activity of each and every member of parliament. And what is more, they can also send questions, public questions, to the MPs, to the members of parliament, and then they get to answer. So we promote this sort of dialogue. In addition to that, we do a lot of campaigning for more transparency, for the improvement of the legislation that has to do with political party financing and so on. So we are the only organization in Greece that is actively involved in improving the political system in terms of making it more open, more approachable, and more transparent.
So you're a watchdog organization.
We're a watchdog.
Does that automatically make you adversaries of the parliament?
We would like to be partners with the parliament. We would like the parliament to improve. We would like the parliament to be truly democratic, open and transparent. So you may say that we're adversary to the parliament that doesn't want these things, that doesn't want openness and transparency. We often help parliament with proposals, ideas, and practical solutions which would increase their openness and their transparency. However, unfortunately, the Greek parliament is not willing to accept our suggestions towards a more open
So you are adversaries to the
So
parliament.
we kind of are. In fact, recently we took parliament to court because they were refusing to provide us with information with regards to a series of political parties that over the years have been mishandling public funding. And we found out that this was taking place over a period of years.
Wait, politicians mishandling public money? That's strange.
Politicians and political parties. Yeah. Long story short, political parties receive public funding from the state. This is something that in the US is not the case. And Parliament is supposed to control and make sure that this funding goes towards the appropriate functions of a political party. What the Parliament has been seeing over the last years was that a lot of political parties have been using these funds to repay, for instance, their private bank loans. This information we got because we took Parliament to court. Otherwise, they wouldn't have given us this information. So this is a strong example, I would say, of our work in Greece as a watchdog organization.
So Vouliwatch has a staff, obviously.
We have a staff.
You have an office, you have a brick and mortar place. Who funds you?
Exactly.
If you're playing such an adversarial role against the government in many ways, trying to make them more transparent, who's funding you?
We get funds from either private donations from citizens, from the European Union, not directly, but through the participation in EU-funded projects. So we apply every year for specific projects and we get funding for it. And then there was a series of international foundations such as the Open Society Institute for Europe, the Guerrilla Foundation, that promote human rights, democracy, and transparency, and wanted to help us since basically we're the only organization in Greece that does the work we do. So basically we're primarily funded by individual.
Do you have the support of the citizenry? I mean, do you have people supporting the work that you do?
Look, we have support in terms of followers, in terms of, the organization and the website is doing really well. There's a good recognition, etc. But as you know, and as our viewers might know, Greece has gone through a very harsh and difficult financial crisis, which has impeded people from donating as much as they would. But I would say that, given the circumstances, we do get considerable support.
And people can donate through your website. It's
www.vouliwatch.gr.
Vouliwatch.gr. Interesting name, by the way. Vouli, which means parliament, and watch, which is an English word. So
this is kind of a trend in Greece to use half Greek, half English words. And the reason why we decided to name it like that was also because we wanted to have an international appearance, if you like, or an international role. In fact, we participate in many international seminars. We are often invited, just recently, I was in Kyrgyzstan as a guest of the United Nations Development Program, which is helping the parliament there to be more open and transparent. So we often are invited by international organizations as experts to help out in parliamentary openness and transparency around the world, not
Well,
just
and I
Europe.
think it's in the world's best interest for Greece, as we saw with the financial crisis when we were talking about Greece bringing down the world economy. I mean, we want Greece, as well as other countries, to have transparency and to have a functioning democracy, because in a global environment, we're all interconnected. So I would imagine that there's a lot of interest in Europe for what you're doing in other European countries.
Yeah, there is. In fact, we have been, and it was a bit of an honor because the European Commission 2 years ago included Vouliwatch, a small organization from a small country, in the top 4 NGOs in Europe that work on democracy and citizen participation. We've also been invited to speak at the European Council's annual meeting, which takes place in Strasbourg, France, every year. So it was there is good recognition abroad, especially within the EU.
So the vast majority of my readers on the Pappas Post are Greeks abroad, Greeks that live in the United States and Canada and the United Kingdom and Australia. The majority of these people have a relationship with Greece. They visit Greece, they have family here, many of them have businesses or real estate. Why should they be interested in what's happening in Greek democracy?
Well, first of all, they should be interested in Greek democracy because they're Greek. Regardless of where you live or where you are or how long you've been away from your country, you'll always feel for your country and you'll always want the best for your country. Secondly, Vouliwatch gives people that live abroad, Greeks that live abroad, the opportunity to interact with members of parliament, to have a say, to send their proposals, their suggestions, their questions even. In fact, we have a lot of examples.
So, sorry for interrupting. Somebody in New York City can log into your website, can go through all of the communications and press releases, and then send a proposal for an idea they have to a specific member of parliament.
Exactly.
Through your website.
Exactly, through our website. And on top of that, they can also see what are the latest bills that are passed in parliament, because we also take note and we present all the latest legislation that is voted in parliament in very simple in words that are not, let me call it, legalese, so that they are understandable to the average person that is not like involved deeply in politics or lawmaking. So I think it acts as a bridge. It could act as a bridge between those that are far away and the politicians that rule their motherland, if you like. And we've got a lot of examples, actually, of citizens that have posted a suggestion or a question or a problem, and you have like parliamentarians that react to it. And we have a number of cases where even like most recently, like a person's life was saved because a group of citizens kept sending messages to MPs about this like a person who lives in rural Greece, up north in borders with Bulgaria. And this guy was morbidly obese. The local hospital had no means of like taking care of his like health problems because of his weight, I guess. And so like a few MPs got motivated by these appeals that happened through our website. And now this hospital has the right facilities to take care of this man. So it acts as a bridge, basically. And obviously, Greeks abroad can use that so that their voice can be heard, especially since soon they'll be given the right to vote.
Which is what I wanted to bring up next. We recently saw in the parliament a motion pass, if I'm not mistaken, allowing or affording Greeks abroad the right to vote. Now, I think there's a little bit of confusion because the headlines were millions of Greeks abroad can now vote. Well, when you analyze this bill and when you see the restrictions that are on it, it's really not giving Greeks abroad the right to vote. I mean, there was some back and forth between the various political parties. I believe even the Prime Minister recently on his visit to the United States made a big announcement how Greeks can vote now. I don't think he gave all of the specific details, that you have to have a dog, a cat, a white picket fence, a house in the Chorion. Let's talk about this. Do Greeks abroad have the right to vote with this law that just passed?
Well, according to estimates and statistics, 335,000 Greeks will be given the right to vote with this bill. Why is that? Because it makes, as you said, it's got a series of preconditions that and criteria that one needs to meet in order to be given the right to vote. For instance, over the last 35 years, they need to have stayed in Greece for at least 2 years. They need to have completed their military service.
2 consecutive years?
2 consecutive years. They need to have completed their military service, if they're men. They need to have a tax, and they need to have paid their taxes in Greece for 2 years prior the elections that are taking place. So it's not ideal in terms of widening the electorate to most Greeks abroad. I think the government, the current government, had different plans. They wanted to include more people. But there was a bit of a compromise because the rest of the political parties were not too keen on giving the vote to, say, Greek Australians or Greek Americans that have been away from Greece for generations and therefore have are not in touch so much with the country. So this bill was a compromise in a way, which, as I said, it gives the right to vote to a fraction of the Greeks abroad.
So citizenship doesn't necessarily mean voting rights. I, for example, was born in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Both my parents were Greek immigrants who came to America. I have a right to Greek citizenship, and I'm in that process now, obtaining my citizenship. I have to submit paperwork and so on and so forth, but I've never lived here. I haven't completed my military service. I don't have a tax presence here. I come, I visit, I go on vacation, I come in the winter, I just spent the holidays here. I won't have that right to vote just with my citizenship because I have to fulfill all of these other criteria in addition to others.
Yeah. Unless you complete your military service and spend the next 35 years, 2 years out of the next 35 years in Greece, you won't have the right to vote.
So it's much ado about nothing, as we say, because in essence, the right to vote is being afforded primarily to that last wave of brain-drained Greeks that have left over the last 10 years, the majority of whom have gone to England, to European capitals to work when the unemployment went through the roof here. That's who this is pretty much targeting. I would estimate that of the 335,000 that you mentioned will qualify, the vast majority are not Greek Americans, Greek Australians, who were born to Greeks, who may have a loose connection to the country, may have a piece of real estate somewhere.
Exactly. Unless, as I said, they meet some of these criteria, but it's quite hard for them to meet these criteria. They're quite strict.
Stefanos, another bill that generated a lot of traffic, if you will, especially on my website when we covered this, was the decision of the current government to not include gender identity and sexual orientation in the Antidiscrimination clause of the Constitution. I want to hear both sides of it because the government, in a very secretive way, from what I understand, used a secret ballot so that publicly the members of parliament would not be seen voting one way or another, which that in and of itself is very sneaky and very underhanded. And then, from what I understand, they didn't release the register of votes. So to this day, we still don't know who voted how. We just know that several hundred members of parliament voted to not include these three criteria: gender identity, and sexual orientation.
And disabilities.
And disabilities. So people with disabilities, gender identity, sexual orientation, and gender are not protected under the Greek Constitution?
Yes. I mean, it's a bit more complicated than that. Obviously, the inclusion of these groups of people in the Constitution would have been like a massive step forward for Greek society and the political system, because the Constitution is the most important piece of legislation in Greece. And it would have mainly had a symbolic impact. It would be a turn, if you like, towards a more progressive Greece. Now, in reality, the rights of these people are obviously protected. I mean, we live in a democracy. We are a member of the European Union. There is a European Union Charter of Human Rights, which includes these groups. So it's not to say that these groups are at risk in Greece. Obviously, let's not get the wrong idea. However, I believe, and I personally believe, that it would have been very important for symbolic reasons to include these groups. It shows a tendency, it shows that the tendency of the current government, which holds a majority and therefore blocked this proposal, towards a tendency towards not following a progressive path. And obviously generated a big uproar in Greece from these communities because they felt left out.
And interestingly enough, it didn't generate a big uproar in the media. It was very difficult to find news about this. And I think that the parliament was to blame because they weren't releasing a lot of the information. But you didn't see the big media publications covering it. The only thing I saw was a press release by Amnesty International that decried this decision. The other publications didn't touch it.
Exactly, and now you're opening a new can of worms and a new chapter because
I'm good at that.
The media landscape in Greece is
Wait till you hear my next can of worms.
It's very problematic. The media landscape in Greece is very, very problematic in the sense that it's mainly controlled and it has very close ties, like the business people that are behind the big media outlets, they have very close ties with the traditional governments, political parties in Greece. And therefore, it happens on many occasions that they will not report on issues that might make look the government bad. And this is not the first time that it happens. The same thing happened when we uncovered the scandal about the political party financing, whereby we uncovered that the current government, New Democracy, has been spending public funds to repay its bank loans, its private bank loans, which is illegal. And this was big. By all accounts, this is big. And yet, no big media outlet in Greece even reported it. This is another problem with Greek democracy, because, as you know, the media is one of the pillars of democracy because it informs people. And without informed people, you cannot have active citizens. And without active citizens, you don't have democracy.
Sure. So there is no independent media in Greece?
There is a lot of independent media, but they're all very small, very underfunded, and they don't have the same outreach. You see, in Greece, we still watch a lot of TV. People watch a lot of TV. And the big media that are very big on TV are usually controlled by businessmen that have connections with traditional political parties. But there are small media, and they're doing a fantastic job despite all the problems they have, but they're still too small. They can't make a dent. They can't promote an issue as much as a big TV channel.
So the political structure in Greece, we've spoken about how democracy works. Some interesting questions I have for you. There's two big parties. There's Nea Demokratia, which we call a center-right party. We have Syriza, which is a conglomerate of various left of center parties. We have, in 2020, the Communist Party of Greece, which is there communism anywhere else in the world? I don't know. I think it fell in Russia 20 years ago, not even in China. But I think the big elephant in the room, and I think we're still talking about this today, and it's something that has generated a lot of publicity, animosity, anxiety on both sides of the aisle, is the issue of Golden Dawn. Golden Dawn was born out of the financial crisis just over a decade ago. They got into parliament, they were very loud, and there's a big trial that has been going on now. Are you monitoring this trial? Have you been watching this?
We have been monitoring it, and we have been collaborating with this, working with this independent organization called Golden Dawn Watch, which is basically monitoring very closely the proceedings.
So before we go on, let's rewind a little bit. Golden Dawn, they lost in the last elections. They didn't reach the 3% threshold to get into parliament. And the trial is, explain a little bit about what happened, how they were brought to court and what they're being accused of.
Yeah, so Golden Dawn is basically being accused of being a criminal organization. At the moment, there is like three main accusations, practical crimes that they've committed. Firstly is the murder of Pavlos Fyssas, a Greek rapper who was known for his anti-fascist rhetoric and actions. Then there was an attack on a deadly attack on some Egyptian migrants who were workers. And then there was an attack on the offices of let's call it labor union, affiliated with the Communist Party. They have, over the last years, Golden Dawn that is, created a system of a structure around this party, which reminds people of the Nazi Party in the sense that they have like training camps for their members. They've got these teams that of thugs that walk around Athens, disturbing immigrants and so on and so forth. So these are the main cases that are brought against Golden Dawn. The trial has been going on for almost 5 years. It's one of the biggest trials after the Nuremberg trial in terms of fighting fascism. And hopefully, like soon it will be over, and Golden Dawn will be charged for being a criminal organization.
It shocked a lot of people that in a country like Greece that suffered so much under the Nazis, and many of us, including myself, grew up in a home with stories of what the Nazis did during World War II. It shocked people to see a party like Golden Dawn. But in a way, isn't that a testament to Greek democracy, that a party like that can get involved in Greek politics?
Exactly. Yes, it is a testament to democracy, the way you put it, yes. But I would say that what is a real testament to Greek democracy is the fact that despite the long and harsh financial crisis, Greece lost 25% of its GDP. This has never happened before in peacetime for any country in the world. So despite that, despite the immense influx of immigrants from Syria and refugees from Syria, for immigrants from Afghanistan, Pakistan, despite all these problems that happened at once, the fact that Golden Dawn managed, yes, obviously got into parliament, but never gained more power than that, and every year it was losing power, up until recently where it didn't even get the election. I think that's a stronger testament to democracy. And why am I saying this? Because in most European countries that haven't had gone through a financial crisis such as the one in Greece, countries that haven't hosted thousands and thousands and thousands of immigrants and refugees, you've had the rise of extreme right-wing political parties joining governments, and you have had otherwise traditionally conservative governments employing and using the rhetoric of right-wing extremist political parties. So if anything, I'm actually, if you'd ask me what I'm proud of in terms of Greece over the last years, I would say it's this. The fact that despite all these problems, the Greek people are deeply democratic, the majority at least, the vast majority, and did not give in to the lies and the poison that Nazi parties, nationalistic parties such as Golden Dawn have been feeding the population with.
Stefanos, I feel after talking to you that I, as a Greek American, living in New York City with occasional visits to Greece, I have an obligation to support the work of Vouliwatch. And I think that anybody that has an interest in Greece, in maintaining the ideals of Greece, the birthplace of democracy, we say it all the time. You guys are actually promoting that and living it. And I feel that, my message needs to be that we need to support the work of Vouliwatch to ensure a better Greece, a more stable Greece. We love coming here, we love the country, we try to promote the ideals of the country abroad. What would your message be to the thousands of people who are reading this right now, or watching this right now on the Pappas Post?
My message to all these Greeks abroad would be that Greece is not just tzatziki, it's not just sirtaki, it's not just the beautiful beaches and the mountains that we've got, it's not just our philosophy, but Greece is mainly, and this is what Greece has given to the whole world, is mainly about democracy, it's about participation, and we're losing that. Over the last few years, democracy in Greece has had severe hits. And this is why Greeks all over the world should be supporting this endeavor, because basically, if you think about it, what brought Greece to where it is today in terms of the financial catastrophe is the fact that over the last 40 years, we lived in a democracy where there was no accountability, there was a lot of corruption, and citizens were fed, I wouldn't say lies, but a fantasy. So Vouliwatch, what we're trying to do is to not only restore democracy, but to promote these essential tools like transparency, accountability, and citizen participation, which will prevent Greece from falling in the same trap.
And that same responsibility lies with all of us abroad also. You mentioned, I love tzatziki too, but it's more than just that. And we need to become more active participants in Greece and support the work that you're doing and support the work that many other organizations are doing also. Stefanos, thank you so much for your time. I really learned a lot today, and I appreciate the time you gave me and the readers of the Pappas Post.
Thanks to you, Gregory.